This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Lowe's has the Labor Day deals you need to give your home a new look. Buy one, get one free select interior paint via Visa gift card rebate. Then, add the final touch with 2 for $8 on select 2.5 or 3-quart mums. Refresh your home and save big while doing it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 9/3. Mums offer in-store only. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. More terms and restrictions apply. See Lowes.com/rebates for details.
It is Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. I hope you had a good holiday weekend. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you yet again. I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer for Slate, and I co-host Split Zone Duo, a national college football podcast. We'll talk about the college football season, whose first week wrapped up the other night with a brutal performance by the North Carolina Tar Heels, led by one Bill Belichick. With a long weekend to chew on it behind us, we'll think through the Dallas Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers in one of the wildest moves any NFL team has ever made. Wild, not in a good way. And we'll talk with Lindsay Darvin, a sports management professor and scholar on video games, about how the gaming world is boosting or not boosting women's sports. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the day in women's sports. Lindsay, have you, as a North Carolina Tar Heels fan, been able to sleep overnight? Are you recovering from that ordeal in Chapel Hill?
I don't know what you're talking about, Alex. I don't know what you're talking about. What weird thing to be asking me about football season. That's not a North Carolina Tar Heel thing.
It's true. Honestly, ridiculous of me to bring it up in the middle of a WNBA playoff race.
Yeah.
That I would even talk about this. Maybe we'll come back to it in a moment. And of course, we've got Ben Lindbergh with us. Ben is a senior editor for The Ringer, and he co-hosts Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast. Ben, how are you?
Once again, asking myself if I'm ready for some football, not knowing the answer, but ready or not, here it comes, as Bill Belichick found out this weekend.
Before we get into our business, as usual, we want to say thank you to our Slate Plus members for making Hang Up and Listen possible. Subscribing helps us make this thing. It also lets you get it ad-free, which is a great perk, and you get bonus segments. And there is good news, because we have heard, as Ben alludes to, that football is now something to be gotten ready for. There are NFL games on Thursday night. There is an NFL game on Thursday night, and there are a series of them, a bunch of them, on Friday and then over the weekend. We will talk about them. We'll preview the NFL season hang-up style, which is to say with a game of Rose, Bud, Thorn. For our Slate Plus members, you can hear it right now as long as you're a member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. Well. Bill Belichick has debuted as a college football coach, and it took him all of one evening against the TCU Horned Frogs to give up more points in a football game, 48 to be exact, than any of his teams ever did in decades in the NFL. It was brutal. North Carolina, after being kind of thunder and lightning on its first drive and marching uninterrupted down the field to score a touchdown on the scripted drive with a really gorgeous 7-play, 83-yard scoring drive, North Carolina could simply do nothing for the rest of the game. There was one 80-yard touchdown drive in garbage time, but other than that, North Carolina could barely string together a drive of more than 3 plays. It at one point was well over an hour between completions by their young quarterback, Gio Lopez. Things were just unbelievably ugly. What a capper to week 1 of the college football season. The most famous coach in football, the greatest coach in NFL history, makes it his personal mission to come to the University of North Carolina and give Lindsay Gibbs as much anxiety as possible. Lindsay, are you... All right, I'm not even going to ask, are you okay? Because I know you're not. On a scale of 1 to 10, where's the panic meter after night 1 of Chapel Bill?
Because I said on the Rosebud Thorn preview that I was going to really embrace all the drama that the Belichick experience provided, but I didn't know it was going to be quite like that the opening scenes were going to be quite the roller coaster. I did not have high expectations coming into this game, but then I'm on my walk my nightly walk, and I bring up the game on Sirius radio right after it started. I hear the touchdown drive. The home radio announcers are describing the crowd, all the celebrities, Mia Hamm, Michael Jordan, in that order, because it's me, of importance. And then they stop TCU on TCU's drive. And just the high, like, I quickly scurried home so I could get this game on the television. By the time I got home, it was quite a different experience. And by the end of the third quarter, the stands were empty. So I think that swing from just the euphoric beginning to the devastation at the end, it makes me want to put the panic meter at a 10. I think more realistically, it's about a 5. This is a completely new team, 70 new players. The team's never that good, although they're never this bad. This is the most points UNC has ever given up in a season opener as well. But I don't know. I'm still, there's going to be some highs this season. I just know it. But this was bleak, and it was hard because I enjoy Belichick being sad. But I don't like...
But now his sadness is your sadness.
But his sadness is my sadness. So I kind of win either way is how I'm trying to frame it. I'm coping, Alex. I'm coping.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange situation because the presence of Belichick at the same time raises your expectations and lowers them, or would raise them, because as you said, there's just so much turnover with this team that if not for Bill Belichick being there and his history as a coach, then you might not expect much of this roster, and it wouldn't be that big a deal if they blow up in week 1. But because Belichick's there, well, you think, oh, maybe he can somehow do it again and his coaching brilliance will actually turn this team into a contender. On the other hand, because of everything that went on in the offseason, it increases the odds and the expectations and the hopes in some quarters of just a complete embarrassing blow up. And that's kind of what we got in week 1 after that first drive, because you said you didn't have high expectations, Lindsay, but it seemed like other people do, because you mentioned all the celebrities, all the athletic luminaries in attendance, not just MJ and Mia Hamm, who will come up later in this episode, I think, but Lawrence Taylor and Roy Williams and Julius Peppers and, not just athletes, but celebrities too, pop culture figures. And Jordan Hudson is hobnobbing with Randy Moss. And it's this big, buzzy crowd, and it feels like an event, and the eyes of the nation are upon them. And then very quickly, people are heading for the exits, and it's just silent and deflated. And it really did not take long to go from the first thing to the second thing. So I guess the question now is, like, will it stay deflated? Will expectations stay super low? And because it went so poorly, it could only be uphill from here. Maybe the expectations have been lowered so much that even competence, just unspectacular, unremarkable competence, would actually suffice. Or will it just be more of the same? I don't know which way this is going to go.
One game is not a 10-year make, obviously, but I think it's interesting just how much this fits with my own fears, or a mix of fears and expectations about the way this was going to go. Because, Ben, you're absolutely right. This was the biggest thing happening in sports on Labor Day, Monday night in America. I mean, this was a bigger story than the U.S. Open. This was a bigger story than anything happening in the NFL preseason, just because it's the Monday night before the season opener. Bigger than anything going on right now in the Major League Baseball pennant race. And that doesn't happen for North Carolina football ever, for any reason, under any circumstances. And I remember when Bill Belichick was hired, one of the things that we talked about on this show was that there's a way for this to be a success even if they suck, or even if they're mediocre, which is typically the order of the day, kind of mediocre to pretty good for North Carolina football. And I think we saw that sort of play out in the extremes in this game. Mm-hmm. Like, North Carolina has already sold out season tickets for the year in football. There is more buzz around North Carolina football than anybody alive or anybody not alive has ever seen before. And you can capitalize that in ways that, if you do it right, could be durable, could outlast Bill Belichick's time at North Carolina. But I got to tell you, I don't think it's going to be a very long time. 1, 2, maybe 3 years. I don't think that they're going to win the ACC under this guy. And I think that as a pure football experiment, this is going to be really hard. And you saw why on Monday night. TCU, not even close to a blue blood, probably not going to be a college football playoff team this year, but just has a more talented roster, has a coach, Sonny Dykes, who understands college football offense in a way that Bill Belichick probably doesn't because he's never coached it before. It was ugly. It was ugly. It was ugly.
Yeah. And so I wonder, though, if it stays ugly, how long will that be the biggest story? Does it have to be ugly in a really embarrassing Jordan Hudson inflected way? I mean, if she doesn't insert herself too much in the story and it's more about the football, even if the football is bad, then will people move on? As long as it doesn't become a complete debacle, in which case everyone will be on Bill Belichick watch and will be counting the weeks and wondering how long he lasts. But if it's just bad for a bit and then it's just sort of unspectacularly bad, it's just a run-of-the-mill bad football team, and everyone gets their jokes in and gets their puns in and says the bill has come due, and do we just move on to the next thing that we kind of collectively make fun of? Or is there just so much pent-up schadenfreude surrounding Bill Belichick that will it be sort of a season-long vigil and celebration for Bill Belichick haters if it continues to go wrong?
I don't think it's ever going to completely go away, but I do think it will help them stay under the radar that they are playing in the ACC and that they do not have that many marquee games on their schedule coming up. The game against Clemson on October 4th is by far their biggest of the season. None of their other opponents are ranked. Of course, that could change. You never know. But, you know, ACC football doesn't tend to stay that far into the spotlight. So I think it'll be a little bit easier. But listen, Jordan Hudson has filed last week for the trademark of gold digger. So I don't think she is looking to stay in the background for much longer, Ben.
Yeah, perhaps not. The biggest winner, I think, of that game was not TCU, but maybe Arch Manning, because everyone just moved on to another topic. So that was good, I guess, because before the game, before his debut as starter, Archie Manning told ESPN's Dave Wilson he ain't even pissed a drop yet, speaking of his grandson, which was a great line. But of course, his grandson did sort of wet the bed in game one, and that was the talk of the college football world and landscape for a day or two until Bill Belichick wiped that away. So I don't know if you have an Arch Manning take to share, Alex, but the Arch Manning conversation has been quieted by Bill Belichick.
I won't engage in Arch Manning doomerism. He's still going to be really good. Mm-hmm. Would be really surprised if he didn't take Texas to the playoff this year and didn't go on to a very successful quarterbacking career. But I don't want to be ironically detached from the week one thing. This was the biggest week one game ever played by ranking. Yeah. Ohio State and Texas. And even though both of these teams are going to be in the playoff, Ohio State's already basically a guarantee. And I think Texas is still going to make it too. I don't like to do the thing where I say, look at me, look how smart I am for not overreacting to week one of the season. It was a big game. So 1 versus 3 game, and he did go out there with absolutely nothing. And that will be part of his college football legacy. And that's totally fair. These games have to matter. And it's his third year on campus. Remember, he feels a little bit like a freshman, but he's not. Mm-hmm. He had been a backup for 2 years. He had gotten a couple of warm-up starts against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State, one of the worst programs in the country and probably the worst program other than Vanderbilt, maybe in the SEC. So he'd gotten some warm-up reps, and I think part of the idea was that he'd be a little bit more ready for a test like this in Columbus. But turns out that Ohio State's a little bit of a different animal than Mississippi State and ULM. So I understand that.
Yep. We got a new Manning face meme, at least, so that was something.
I will run through a couple of other quickies in the college football schedule this weekend, and you can tell me if any of them caught your eye. Was anybody interested in the situation at the University of Tennessee vis-a-vis the University of California, Los Angeles, where they did a quarterback swap over the offseason? Tennessee's quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, who took them to the college football playoff last year, walked out the door, allegedly over a financial dispute during spring practice, and then in response to that, Tennessee took UCLA's quarterback, Joey Aguilar, in the transfer portal. as Iamaleava went the other way. They basically traded. Aguilar had played at Appalachian State last year in the great state of North Carolina. But anyway, the early returns are in on that. And Iamaleava, the high-priced quarterback from Tennessee who went to UCLA, got just destroyed by a much better Utah team, whereas Aguilar had one of the best quarterback performances of the week in college football. So Tennessee, moneyballing it a little bit.
What else you got?
Well, let's see. I was very interested in LSU and Clemson on Saturday night. This was another top 10 game. LSU was much better than Clemson. LSU won 17-10 at Death Valley, which isn't very descriptive because both schools call their home Death Valley. But LSU won this game at Clemson, 17-10. Probably should have been 24-10 if the officiating crew, the video replay crew, had not overturned in a perplexing fashion another LSU touchdown. Big credit to LSU. And I have to tell you guys that I think the University of Miami, may in fact be back after decades away. They look to me, after beating Notre Dame on Sunday night in a game that was close but probably shouldn't have been, like a real national title caliber team this year. I don't know if they'll get there, but I think the talent on both sides of the ball tells me that they could get there. I would hate that, of course, because I'm not a big believer in the city of Miami as a place, but interesting team, interesting season ahead for the Hurricanes.
Alex, how much should the people in Tuscaloosa be panicking?
Oh, I almost didn't mention it. The University of Alabama. Yeah. Terrible. So Florida State went 2-10 last year with one FBS win over the Cal Golden Bears by 5 points. They now have one FBS win in 2025, and that's thanks to the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. They are panicking at Alabama, my friends. Panicking. This is a team that had 17 years of being the absolute cat's meow in sports, in college football, just feeling amazing about themselves, knowing that they were the best, being able to hold that over everybody. And they have lost 5 of their last 10 games going back to last year. 3 of those, I believe, as double-digit point favorites, including this one on Saturday. Florida State a little bit better than 2-10, obviously, but yeah, if you want to see a proper meltdown of a fan base, you just keep an eye on what's happening with our friends in Tuscaloosa. And didn't
the slide happen after they got to number 1 in the poll last year? Like they reached an AP number 1 and then started losing.
Yeah, they beat Georgia in a really classic game that I think probably did take them to number 1.
Yeah,
4 games into last year, and then it has been a world of pain since then. So I think if we were kind of rating fan bases by level of panic after 1 week of the college football season, there's no question that we would put Alabama Crimson Tide fans at number 1. And for the rest of us, it's a beautiful place to be if you enjoy just seeing a little bit of variety in your college football machinations over the year. Going to be very interesting. Much more college football to come this season. Lindsay?
That was very entertaining. I was listening to one of Ben's colleagues over at The Ringer, one of their college football podcasts, I think Tailgaters, and they were reading quotes from the Alabama message boards. And my God.
Yes. It's a classic. It's a classic. We're living in a time that some people have always prayed for, to get to see something like this at Alabama. Of course, I'm not among them. I don't root for anybody's downfall.
Yeah.
You know me. I wouldn't do that.
Haters are thriving is the theme of this segment.
And haters also thriving in regards to our segment that you'll hear in just a moment. The Dallas Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers in a head scratcher.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-In and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
3 weeks ago, we talked with RJ Ochoa, the editor-in-chief of the Dallas Cowboys outlet Bloggin' the Boys. We talked with RJ about what was then an ongoing mess, but still a manageable one, unfolding at Cowboys training camp. Micah Parsons, the edge rusher, who had just had arguably the best 4-season run ever for a pass rusher to start his career, was in need of a new contract after this season at the latest, and the Cowboys were not giving it to him. Parsons was obviously in line to become the highest paid defensive player in the league, but Jerry Jones, who has a history of getting into drawn-out contract fights with his best players and then surrendering after making a bit of a fuss, seemed to be digging in his heels here a bit more than usual, and so did Parsons, who asked for a trade. On Thursday, we finally got a resolution after weeks of this, and it was frankly a shocking one. The Cowboys traded Parsons to the Green Bay Packers for veteran defensive tackle Kenny Clark and a pair of first-round picks, which will be late first-round picks, nearly second-round picks, in part because, well, the Packers now have Micah Parsons. They also gave him that obvious contract that does make him the highest-paid defender in football. So just half a year after the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic, another North Texas pro sports team, has taken a prime-age player who is clearly on his way to the Hall of Fame and decided, you know what, we don't want that guy anymore. Ben Lindbergh, I don't think any of us are going to defend this trade on the Cowboys' part, but what I'm most interested in is the act of burning the bridge with a high-level, possibly, likely even historic talent and trading him away with so many years left of prime-age play. We've seen it twice in Dallas now just recently. We saw it with Juan Soto a couple of years ago and then again before he reached his free agency in baseball. Is there ever a circumstance in which a team can make a move like this, shipping out a potential all-time player at this age, and the team not be on the road to ruin?
Well, Jerry Jones would and did cite the Herschel Walker trade as a case where it worked out as a possible precedent, but you can't bank on that kind of return these days or any days. And even if you nail the return for the young generational superstar, as the Nationals did with Juan Soto, that might not be enough because other things might go wrong. And maybe you don't deal that kind of player in the first place unless it looks like you're on the downslope or your ownership is cheaping out. So no, ultimately, I'm always going to come down on the side of keeping and paying the young generational superstar instead of trading them for lottery tickets, for draft picks, for prospects, for salary relief, whatever it is. This is the kind of player that every team is trying to get. And when you get them, rarely do you give them away. So the Cowboys fans can hope that this turns into the Walker trade all over again. And I guess Packers fans can hope that Parsons is the new, younger Reggie White. I think the latter seems more likely than the former, but neither is guaranteed. I mean, it's true what you're saying about Dallas. I don't think any city has experienced sports upheaval over the past year, more so than this region with the Luka trade and then the Cooper Flagg pick and then the Mikko Rantanen trade that the Stars made an extension, which we talked about on the show. Now this. So tons of downs, some ups as well. You know, I think if you wanted to make the case that this isn't a Luka-level disaster, I think you could point to a pretty mixed track record when it comes to giving giant contracts to non-quarterbacks or even just defensive players specifically, because sometimes you get Aaron Donald, sometimes you get Khalil Mack or Ndamukong Suh. So it's hard to build a team around a defensive player, no matter how great. But if you're going to build around anyone, it would be someone who's off to just an incredible start. And this young, because it's just rare for a player this good to get traded, but especially this young when there's still plenty of prime age performance ahead of him. It's just, he's going to cost a lot. You know, it's a record contract that the Packers are giving him. There's been a lot of salary inflation for pass rushers just this offseason with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt and now Parsons. So you are committing a lot of your payroll to one guy, and that could always go wrong, especially if it's not a quarterback. But you got to like the upside and the potential there.
Yeah, I just still think it's just wild how much Jerry Jones botched this. I mean, this all started because he decided to try and negotiate without an agent and circumvent the Players Association rules and the kind of power structure that exists and try and pretend that he's in the 80s with this, old boys network and can just do it person to person. And it's just unprofessional, honestly. It's unprofessional. And he thought he had negotiated a deal with Parsons. And then when Parsons was like, wait, no, you have to talk to my agent. This isn't a deal. He basically threw a months-long hissy fit and refused to continue to negotiate. But then when the alarm bells started ringing about this not being done, when Parsons put his trade request on the Notes app and put it on social media, Jerry Jones just keeps saying over and over again, don't lose any sleep over this. We're going to get the deal done. It's just more theatrics, and they're theatrics without any substance. And it's, if I was a Cowboys fan, I would just be so exhausted by this. Because it's all self-created. It feels like Jerry Jones is, he's a showman, but what is he showing? He's showing his own incompetence.
I think this is the first time that I've really believed the theory that an owner is doing something not even to save money, because ultimately the Cowboys are going to spend to around the salary cap, but not making a decision that is not necessarily to even save money in the aggregate, and that I actually don't think is even representative of an attempt to win. Like, I really do believe the idea that RJ Ochoa put forward on the show, and that a number of people have kind of pontificated about the past couple of weeks, that Jerry acted this way in this ordeal for attention.
Yeah.
Like I really think that is a significant driver of what happened here. Like, and Jerry has been great at getting that kind of attention. Like, he, in addition to the multiple Netflix specials about the Cowboys that have been pretty popular of late, the way that he has seemed to enjoy holding court with the press about this, the long press conference where, by the way, he looked terrible, that he held with the Dallas media after this trade, the justification of it, trying to explain to people like they're in third grade how a salary cap works and how you need money for other good players, and kind of enjoying that back and forth give and take with the media. I really think he just loves this shit. And he was just having a blast doing it, and being able to say, no, I didn't blink on one of these after surrendering huge contracts, clearly player tilted contracts towards just about every one of his other stars who have been in these situations, I think brings him a special kind of joy. And so if you're a Cowboys fan, you just have to deal with this. You're going to have a worse football team, but your owner gets to feel great about himself. And that's that.
Yeah, it's clearly an ego-related thing, because as much as he tries to sell this as, it will actually improve our weaknesses and Kenny Clark's going to make all the difference, this wasn't the plan coming into this whole negotiation. No. It's clearly something, it's a face-saving move, or just like bitterness proceeded to the point that he felt like he had to deal him. But it clearly wasn't something that he entered the offseason saying, this will be the best for the Cowboys, competitively speaking. I mean, it's true that if they had kept him and given him a massive extension, it would have been a ton of money to commit to their top three guys after the Dak Prescott contract and the CeeDee Lamb contract. Now, that's partly Jerry Jones's fault in the first place, because he was so stubborn with them and ultimately cost himself money in those cases, as we talked about with RJ. And if he had just signed them to earlier extensions, then it wouldn't be taking up quite as high a percentage of the salary cap to pay those guys. And if you're going to pay three guys, maybe the majority of your payroll, then those aren't a bad three guys to choose. But, there aren't a lot of cases, I guess, of teams that have paid their top trio that much and have managed to compete. You could also say, well, they couldn't quite break through. They couldn't win a Super Bowl with Parsons. So, we can not win a Super Bowl without you. The old Branch Rickey, Ralph Kiner kind of line. And you could point out that the Cowboys defense wasn't even that good last year with Parsons most of the time. That's not Parsons' fault. As Bill Barnwell of ESPN pointed out, the Cowboys were the best team on defense by EPA per play with Parsons on the field, and the worst without him. So that's something to look forward to. But those would be the cases, basically, that we couldn't win with him. It would have been super expensive and hard to win with him if we had extended him. But there's no way you wake up and look at this roster without Parsons and say, yeah, they're more likely to win this year or during Jerry Jones's lifespan without Parsons than they were with him.
But that's what his quote was. His quote is, this was a move to get us successful in the playoffs. This was a move to get better on defense, stopping the run. This was a move to, if we get behind, not be run on. And it was a deliberate move, a well thought out move to make this happen. It's just like, what are you doing? And I got to say, the irony of this being a trade between a team with the most high profile and meddling owner to a team with no actual owner, like no official owner. I don't know. There's some beauty there.
I think that the last point I would make about this is this one. The Herschel Walker trade was great and also will never happen again because NFL teams don't give up those kinds of returns anymore. And I think there is something important to this point that even if you somehow manage to win the trade, quote unquote, on value terms, making a trade like this probably indicates that you're doomed. Mm-hmm. I think a lot about the Soto trade a couple years ago in baseball. I mean, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but just on pure wins for dollars terms and years of control of Juan Soto, the Washington Nationals won that trade.
Yeah,
when they sent him out.
Couldn't have done better.
Yeah. Like, it was a great trade. It's the thing that you hope the Pirates will get when they trade Paul Skeens in a year and a half and whatever. But just as it will be true then with the Pirates, that they'll be going nowhere when they trade Skeens. It's not like the Nationals have actually won anything or been anything other than terrible, or have an outlook even the next year or two to be anything other than terrible, even though they got an all-star shortstop and a good starting pitcher and one of the best corner outfield young players in baseball in James Wood. Because when you're trading players like this, you are saying we're not that serious. Mm-hmm. And in baseball, you're also saying we're not trying. Baseball is obviously not a salary cap sport, and you have owners like the owners of the Nationals who can just not try. I'm not saying the Cowboys aren't trying at all, but if you're shipping out guys like this, you're shipping out the easiest way to win championships, which is to have exceptional players at the top of your team.
Yep.
And so maybe you'll make 2 awesome first-round picks with these picks that you got for Micah Parsons. Still seems pretty unlikely that you're going to wind up in a better place, even if you get more, per dollar efficiency on contributing to wins.
Yeah, right. That's not something that anyone other than the owner particularly cares about, your dollars per win, your surplus value. The last thing I'll say is that when we talk about big surprising trades like these, we end up talking about the team that traded the player much more than we talk about the team that traded for the player. And maybe that makes sense because the default assumption should be that, yeah, we'll take Micah Parsons. Why wouldn't we? And so then we end up talking about, well, why did a team decide not to keep him when they had him already? And what could have possibly gone into that decision and what went wrong? But I will just salute the Packers. I mean, they don't need as much consolation. Cowboys fans, of course, are fretting and wondering how this happened. Packers fans are probably just celebrating because fans love to give up picks because teams know that they're worth something, but you never know quite what it cost you. I mean, you can look at the players that the team you traded the picks to uses those picks on, but even then you don't know that you would have had those. So it's kind of just funny money to you. It's just imaginary. It's like, yeah, we could have hypothetically had some good players in the future, but we've got Micah Parsons now. So kudos to the Packers, though, for being the team that stepped up. I don't know whether this was the most that the Cowboys could have gotten, because it sort of seems like once they decided to move Parsons, they moved pretty quickly. But the Packers have been a team that's been cautious and kind of collected draft picks and stockpiled them, and that's worked out fine for them. But you got to know when to cash those in when a player like this becomes available. And they did that. So suddenly they're an exciting team, as I think you plan to discuss on our bonus segment.
Indeed. Slate Plus members will have a bit more NFL for you in just a bit if you go and check your bonus episodes in your Slate. Actually, let me do this better. 3, 2, 1. Indeed. Slate Plus members, keep your eyes peeled for our NFL preview. It should be in your podcast feeds right now. Up next, we'll talk about a big milestone for women in sports video games.
eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Change is always happening, but no matter what changes in 5 years, there's one thing that will stay the same: the price of your internet. With the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee, you get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi, with our best equipment included, for a price that stays exactly the same. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. Most reliable Wi-Fi based on Open Signal Awards USA. Fixed Broadband Experience Report, August 2024.
WNBA players have appeared in the NBA 2K video game franchise for a handful of years, but this year's release, coming later this very week, will be the first edition to allow players to build mixed teams with WNBA and NBA players. This is thought by many to be a pretty important milestone for women's hoops in video game form, because the more you can blend women's hoops and men's hoops, the more gamers might play as women, the more spotlight the WNBA might get by way of the video game, and the more people would remember that basketball is just basketball. Nafisa Collier, discussed in our bonus show last week, is the highest rated WNBA player in the game, by the way. She's a 98 overall, 1 point ahead of Aja Wilson. On Hang Up, we talk a good bit about female athletes' efforts to grow their sports, to get a bigger piece of the pie, to play at a high caliber, but we don't talk much about what I think is an important frontier in these fights, and that is video games. We are lucky to be joined now by Lindsay Darvin, a sport management professor at Syracuse University, who has studied video games quite a bit in her role as an associate editor of the Journal of Electronic Gaming and Esports. Lindsay, welcome and thanks for being here. Do you think that video game companies do have a substantial role to play in the growth of women's sports here? And if so, do you think they're living up to that role, doing a good enough job?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I love to talk about women's sports whenever possible. Absolutely, they do. And I will say I wrote a piece for Forbes last week, and I've received some harsh criticism on that piece discussing the role of video games in driving popularity of women's sports and kind of socializing people to accept women athletes and women teams. And when I get harsh criticism, we know we're getting somewhere. That's usually what I go off of. That's sort of like my baseline. So yeah, the real issue that a lot of video game developers have right now is that the space is being highly protected. It's a highly masculine environment, even more so than a lot of traditional sport environments. So they're not always doing the best job with representation of women avatars and then women athletes in general. But when they do a good job, like I think NBA 2K26 is doing, it can really move the needle for women athletes and women teams, and it can normalize women's sports in a platform and in an area where you might not traditionally see it displayed as frequently. So video games can do a lot to move the needle and socialize folks to kind of accept women athletes a little bit more. And it's just exposure and visibility. And those are really key pieces to growing fandom and growing acceptance of women athletes.
So in 2011, a 14-year-old girl named Lexi Peters wrote a letter to Electronic Arts to say that it was unfair to women and girl hockey players that EA's hockey games forced them to be represented by male avatars and to request a female character option. And in response, EA enabled female avatars in NHL 12, even made Peters' face the default choice. So she's now in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first female character in a hockey video game. So take us from 2012 to today. What are some of the major milestones, or which franchises have led the charge in integrating men and women into sports video games, which have lagged behind?
I always like to go to sort of that initial entry point for video games and athletes, and really it's those cover pages, right? On the initial cover of the video games themselves. And in my opinion, I mean, that's a great story, but I also think that franchises like FIFA have done a really good job. And a lot of times that's because the visibility of actual women athletes on their cover is there for people to see. And that's what's publicized, that's what's advertised. So that really helps to move the needle as well. NBA 2K is just a little bit different though. Like the context is different because these WNBA players are already gaining visibility and popularity because the sports are pretty much identical, right? Basketball is an identical sport between men and women. The rules are exactly the same, or they should be pretty much exactly the same. The ball size is a little different. That's the only rule change. It gives an opportunity for folks to say it's just basketball, right? Kind of how we open this segment here. Like NBA 2K it's not to say that they're doing the best job, but they have this real opportunity to do the best job because basketball is basketball. The other thing too is these avatars and these player ratings, they are legitimate professional women players, right? So some of these other franchises that are mostly putting in women avatars sort of as placeholders initially, and there aren't pro leagues that are necessarily associated with those athletes, or they're not gaining that visibility through professional play. I don't think that it has the same opportunity that NBA 2K does to sort of grow visibility of women athletes. And they're doing, in my opinion, a better job now with the My Team feature. And they have a lot of, again, the ceiling is higher, I would say, for basketball in general because of the similarities between the sports, because you have a really prominent professional women's league, because women's college sports are growing in fandom. And so these people are following these athletes from the college ranks up through the pro. I'd like to see a women's college basketball, game on its own kind of take off, similar to NCAA football at this point as well, so people can follow them all the way through. But 2K just has a higher ceiling, in my opinion, right now. As those other pro leagues for women grow, then those other game titles are going to have a similar ceiling that they can match. But I think that 2K is doing a great job right now.
I'm not a video game person. I have to be upfront about that. But the thought of playing together sounds so interesting to me. Like, what does that innovation mean? It also, I will admit, is a little scary to me because the direct comparisons can sometimes be unfavorable, right? And I'm just picturing a lot of clips of, Giannis blocking Caitlin Clark over and over again or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Of just like really brutal stuff. Talk me through what that's going to look like in practice and what you think, like, actually sharing teams, like what that's going to do.
I always, honestly, I go to, if we think about traditional sports spaces, and I was a basketball player. I was not a Division I player. I was Division III, but you play pickup, right? You play with men all the time when you're growing up.
Right.
I was never blocked by anybody that I play. You know what I mean? So it's like the thing that a lot of, I think, casual people associated with the sport of basketball don't understand is like when men and women play together, when girls and boys play together and they're gamers, like they're good basketball players, the game just flows normally, regardless of who's on the court at that time, right? Mixed gender teams are pretty normal when you're growing up as a basketball player. So as a player, it's not super odd to me to think about these athletes being combined on the same team. I know it's all in virtual spaces, but what you're bringing up is exactly kind of what we're combating right now, because a lot of what's happening is these like traditional world stereotypes are seeping into these virtual worlds, which is really damaging. And people are kind of saying, to your point, well, what does that look like if Angel Reese is trying to make a layup, like she's just going to get blocked by Shaquille O'Neal? What is that going to mean for the sport, and how does that make these women athletes look? But the point is, virtual spaces aren't restricted by traditional world stereotypes and physical attributes and things like that. So it's there's a real opportunity here for it to just look like normal basketball, right? And like athletes playing together, sharing the court together, similar to some of those pickup games that, again, if you're not a basketball player, you didn't grow up in that world, you might not be as familiar with those like mixed gender opportunities. But my hope is that it's going to play out for gamers in a way that seems very natural and in a way that just seems like, oh, we're just like mixing these teams up. And I like Angel Reese and I like Caitlin Clark and I like LeBron James and I want to put them on the same team together. And it's just going to kind of flow in that way for people. And it's not going to be, a very odd thing to see.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too, because to this point, I guess the sports franchises have largely sidestepped that question of like what would actually happen if they were to match up in a competitive standpoint, because the way they handle the player ratings is that it's essentially on the same scale, right? And so is that seen as, are there people who say, well, you're striving for realism? Some of these sports games, not all of them, will play up, oh, this is a real simulation of the sport and it's highly accurate and it maps onto what it actually is like. Are there people who make good faith criticisms about, oh, if you have women and men playing in FIFA or NHL or whatever, that it wouldn't look like this? Or is that just kind of a way to express bitterness about women being in what people have traditionally considered a men's game? And, what has the general reaction / backlash from, let's say, male gamers tended to be?
So, and I come at this from a biased perspective, because I would say we should never have virtual spaces that are restricted by in real life environments, right? And like attributes and things like that. But to your point, there's been a lot of criticism, right? So I did a study a couple years ago looking at the first announcement of adding WNBA players into NBA 2K. And the criticism was pretty much what you're alluding to. It's like men's sports is the measuring stick. Like men athletes are the bar. And then women athletes have to match that. And if they don't match that or exceed, again, what does that mean? Like dunking, speed, height. I mean, it's just, it's kind of like these fictional measuring sticks, but men athletes are kind of put in a position where like they are the bar. And if women athletes don't match it, then it's not real. It's not exciting. And there's a lot of criticism for that. There's criticism from gamers. Again, we can't really gender the studies that we do because we look at basically comments on like Instagram posts and things like that. So we don't really know who's saying it. But there are a lot of critiques about sort of like this invasion of like men's spaces. So not only do you have an invasion in gaming, but then you have an invasion in sport gaming and traditional sport, or they think it's that way. And that's always been an issue, right? Like women are like taking over men's spaces, and that's really intimidating to men or threatening to men. So those are a lot of the critiques that we're seeing right now. But again, it's like my big thing is the exciting piece of these virtual spaces is that you can be anything you want. You can do anything you want. There aren't those restrictions. So I would hope that as these game developers continue to place the different opportunities for people to play with women avatars in similar ways that they're playing with men, that some of that will kind of begin to fade, and only time will tell. But I would hope 10 years from now, if we have a similar conversation, it's just so normalized that Angel Reese and Shaquille O'Neal are playing together on the same team. Like that's not weird anymore. So we'll see, but only time will tell. But I think, again, socialization is so powerful. Like as people continue to see this and have these opportunities, and they continue to drop some of those like real world or in real life stereotypes about women athletes, this can, again, kind of move the needle and I think bring more fandom and popularity to women's sports overall.
Or could the future be separate, but in the way that the sports leagues are separate because they each have their own, right? And instead of talking about women's basketball players in what was a traditionally male basketball players game, there's just a WNBA game, right? Could that happen? Because, there isn't a lot of precedent for that. In 1998, there was a PlayStation tennis game called Anna Kournikovas Smash Court Tennis, which was never released in North America. And then in 2000, there was a Nintendo 64 game called Mia Hamm Soccer 64, which was really just a reskinned version of an existing soccer game with female characters hastily animated by an all-male development team to capitalize on the U.S. victory in the 1999 Women's World Cup. So we still haven't seen many or any authentic standalone women's sports games designed from the ground up to feature female athletes. So is that the future? Would the market support that?
It's a great point. I At this stage, I don't know that the market solely supports a women's sports title on its own. And that's mostly because we are still learning a lot about women's sport fans, regardless of gender identity. Like, we're learning a lot about like, who are these fans? We know that the one positive is that women's sports fans are higher level consumers traditionally than men's sports fans are. So they spend more money, basically, or they at least are more willing to spend money when that sponsor or that game perhaps is associated with the sport that they follow or the athletes that they follow. So there's a chance that a title on its own could be successful. I would say and this is even kind of a conversation about like women in esports, even like players, like, is separate but equal the way to go? Like, should we have like separate women's esport teams? Should we have separate women's sports game titles? I don't know. I worry a little bit initially about sort of like the effort and marketing and publicity that would go behind that. I like the idea of having this be a combined effort. I think that it can gain a lot of traction from fans that might not traditionally consider women's sports to be something that they're interested in. It exposes them to something different. And you're tapping into the same market of gamers, right? Like, you're not trying to like carve out a new market while also trying to build up a game title at the same time. But I mean, only time will tell. I think it'll be interesting to see in the next 5 to 10 years how well some of these changes to 2K do and how gamers enjoy them or don't enjoy them, or the changes that they want to see. And maybe there will be that opportunity as the WNBA continues to grow. I think the WNBA is the best opportunity to maybe have a separate game title, just given the popularity that exists right now. Honestly, maybe something combined with collegiate women athletes at the same time, right? Like, maybe you can make a game title where you're combining those college women players with the pro players, and that could be something interesting to bridge the gap between those two fan bases a little bit more. But right now, I think we need to learn a little bit more about the consumers of women's professional sport and like see. And there's research to be done there, right? See if they would be interested in gaming. Because right now, I do think that those two markets are a little bit too separate. So adding the players to 2K is probably the best approach for now, but we can see in another couple of years.
EA and 2K are squabbling right now over bringing back an NCAA basketball franchise. So I guess they have to sort out when that will happen or what form it will take. But I've noticed that one way that backlash is expressed sometimes is just in terms of the larger backlash towards sports games, which in general, people kind of have a fatigue with the annual releases and the incremental improvements, and, review scores have gone down over time on average. And there's just frustration with sort of the monopolistic consolidation of certain franchises where you used to have more competition and multiple companies making sports games. And now there's just sort of an established standard for each sport for the most part. And there's a sense that there's been kind of a complacency there. So sometimes I've seen people will couch their objections, not in terms of I'm sexist and I don't want women in my man's world, but in terms of I want them to fix what ails the game. And therefore there's this opportunity cost of, they're spending all their time putting women in the game instead of making the game better in some way. And, whether that is actually a legitimate complaint or not, that does seem to be a way that sometimes you can critique it without sounding sexist at the very least.
Yeah. And we're not seeing that in our research right now, but that is a good point. And that could be something to look into in the future as well. Right now, so much, it's just overwhelmingly essentially sexist and discriminatory in terms of like how people implicitly are associating the women players in these games and how they want them to basically kind of stay in their lane in a sense. And they want the avatars to like, again, they just assume that Caitlin Clark isn't ever going to be able to score a point on LeBron James. So let's keep that realistic in the game. And our critique of that would be, again, these are not in real life settings. Like, these are virtual spaces. So we're not seeing that yet, but that's a really good point. We're looking at, since this was just released, we did grab comments from Instagram posts, Facebook posts of this new My Team feature. And so we're going to be diving into that data soon, hopefully. So maybe we will find that is some of the critique now. And you're right, that's not inherently sexist. That's critiquing the game developers. So we'll have to see, but that's a really good point.
On the one hand, video games sound like the ideal space to do this kind of socialization that you're talking about because of the lack of limits to a virtual world and the ability to just show basketball being basketball. But on the other hand, it does sound like maybe the worst place to try to make any kind of gender progress in sports because, well, video games and the culture of video games. Ultimately, as you do this work and you perform scholarship on it, do you lean any which way? I think I hear some optimism in your voice that sort of the limitless nature of video games might be a powerful force for good, then misogynistic video game culture is a force for bad. But it clearly is some kind of push-pull, and you have to hope that the one wins out over the other. How confident are you that it can? And do you think that the companies that would have to make these games and withstand perhaps some of that cultural backlash sort of have the stomach to do what needs to be done for this work to really accelerate?
And I'm certainly cautiously optimistic to the points that you're making. When I'm on, when I talk to folks in the industry and when I'm discussing my research, it's what I'm learning from the work that I'm doing is like, I don't blame the parents of the 10-year-old girl from keeping her off of these platforms and not interacting with folks online that they don't know. I mean, some of the things that are spread and said, chats and things like that are really harmful, right? And it's like, you don't want a young girl to have things said to her in these spaces that could be extremely detrimental to like her growth and her development, right? So there are certainly like the realities of this space, and especially when you're talking about esport, right? And like actually competing, there are definitely limitations in terms of like where we're at with policing these environments. So, and that is on the game developers, right? That's on the consoles. Like we don't have a good way to police these spaces right now. So from that perspective, that's where my caution comes in. I'm not the type of scholar that's like, oh, let's just like throw all these kids in or let's throw all these young women in and just like let them have it and let the chips fall where they may. And we need to like force this down people's throats to make change. But where's the change coming from? The change is coming from hopefully new leadership. And that happens across the board. If you look at any like male prominent industry in the past, it's taken more women and more diversity in the leadership ranks to really shift and change some of the priorities and the policies that exist and the representation overall. So that's where the optimism comes from. I mean, more and more women and diverse individuals are getting into the gaming environments, and that's hopefully going to continue to grow. I mean, Syracuse, we just started our esport major, right? Like we have more women coming into that major. They're going to graduate with that degree and they want to go into that industry. And like, this is brand new stuff, right? So that's the optimism, is that as it's not just the gamers themselves, right? It's like, as we see more sort of diversity in employees and leadership in these spaces, the hope is that a lot of this starts to kind of, I don't want to say figure itself out, but the hope is that you start to see some of the hostility decrease and some of those instances decrease. And again, socialization is so important. Like a lot of the work that I've done in the past in terms of just the folks that are playing these games, so sport video games aside, right? But the folks that are playing them, when you think about it, I mean, a lot of times women even younger than me were actually discouraged from participating. So like we're talking about like a pre-Title IX era here in gaming. Like parents don't want to buy girls consoles. Like that's still a thing that exists right now. So, similar to like the 1950s and 60s with sports, it's like parents maybe didn't want to buy their kid a basketball at that time, a girl a basketball, because they didn't think she should be playing sports. That's the other thing that we're battling here. So that's why something like 2K, having these women avatars, like that's powerful, not just for like the young people who might want to get involved in gaming, but even like parents and guardians who are like, oh, okay, like this seems like a better space maybe for you to participate. And like you are represented here. And it seems like this might be safer for you to be in this environment. And I'm more willing to purchase this for you because it's basketball, right? So I don't know. There's a lot to change. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I still have that caution. I'm not the type of researcher that's like, let's just like ram it down people's throats and like hope that change comes. I think that we just have to compare gaming to some of these other spaces that have existed previously and kind of look at the trajectory of what that took. And so gaming is, in my opinion, is getting there and it's moving forward to be more inclusive, but there's obviously a lot of work, but hopefully things like 2K can help move the needle further.
Lindsay Darvin, Syracuse University and the Journal of Electronic Gaming and Esports. Thank you so much for coming on Hang Up and Listen. It was fun.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And now it is that special time of the episode, the time for an Afterball. A couple of years ago, in the spring of 2021, the Chicago White Sox were playing an otherwise nondescript American League Central game against the Minnesota Twins in Minneapolis. But it was a blowout. It was 15-4. The White Sox were beating the Twins late in this game. And the Twins, as Major League Baseball teams tend to do when they are trailing by double-digit runs late in the game, put on a position player, utility man Willians Astudillo, to pitch to close out this game, to eat some innings. The White Sox sent their own hitter, Yermin Mercedes, up to the plate to face this position player, Astudillo. And Astudillo, not being a pitcher, was not being very competitive in this at-bat and started the count 3-0 on Yermin Mercedes. And then Yermin Mercedes did just about the most disrespectful thing that you could do in baseball, which is when seeing a 3-0 pitch from a position player in an 11-run game on the road thrown directly over the plate, chose to swing his bat and hit the ball over the fence for a White Sox home run. This was extremely controversial. Later in the series, the White Sox, managed by, of course, none other than Tony La Russa, opted to throw behind Yermin Mercedes in seeming retribution for his disrespectful breach. The unwritten rule against swinging on a 3-0 pitch when you're up by a ton of runs in a baseball game goes back to, well, I couldn't exactly figure out how long because it's an unwritten rule. It's fake. It doesn't exist. But it does seem to be something that has a long history of really upsetting pitchers, managers, what have you, on baseball teams to whom this happens, to whom a 3-0 home run is hit in a blowout. And so a few years ago, with the help of some collaborators at 538, including Neil Payne, who has been on this program before, I sought to do some research using at-bat by at-bat count data, going back decades from StatHead, to find out just how many times Major League hitters had done something so disrespectful, such an obvious breach of the unwritten rules where a player would swing on a 3-0 count in a blowout game and hit a home run, and what ramifications flowed when they did so. And I was able to find that since 1988, a bit more than a dozen players had had the gall to swing on a 3-0 pitch while leading by at least 6 runs in the 7th inning or later of a Major League Baseball game. And exactly 2 of those at-bats with the 3-0 home runs, late in blowouts, had been hit by players who, get this, had the same exact manager. Thomas Howard in 2000 for the St. Louis Cardinals, leading by 12 runs in the 9th inning, playing on the road at Three River Stadium against the Pirates, hit a home run off a position player. And then in 2021, Mercedes of the White Sox, also managed by Tony La Russa, against the Minnesota Twins, facing a 3-0 count, leading by 11 runs in the 9th inning, hit a home run. It turned out that the 2 most contemptible breaches in the history of this unwritten rule of Major League Baseball that says don't swing away on a 3-0 count late in a blowout had been committed by players under the management of one Tony La Russa. La Russa, after the occasion of Mercedes' home run, was swift to condemn it. He called the dinger, quote, a big mistake, and said that his player was, quote, clueless, and also that he would spank Yermin Mercedes if he wasn't so big and strong. I did go back and find that in 2000, when his other player, Thomas Howard, hit a home run off a position player on a 3-0 count in this circumstance, that there was no indication in the newspapers of the day that Tony La Russa had said anything condemning his player, Thomas Howard, for doing this. But anyway, Ben, I have been able to ascertain that the 2 most egregious, vile violations of baseball's rule, unwritten rule that is, against swinging away and hitting a home run on a 3-0 pitch late in a blowout have been committed by Tony La Russa's players. And so I ask you, Ben, for our Afterball this week, what is your Tony La Russa?
Well, I'm about to tell you, Alex, and thank you for that intro. I remember that article. I will never forget Willians Astudillo, who was a favorite of mine. And I remember Yermin Mercedes, the Yerminator, or the Yerminator. The nickname doesn't really work if you pronounce that correctly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm going to attempt to pronounce many tennis players' names in this segment, so wish me luck. There is no shortage of interesting storylines at the U.S. Open, which will conclude this coming Sunday. As we record, Taylor Fritz is the last American hope in a men's quarterfinals bracket that includes usual suspects Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz, and Jannik Sinner. On the women's side, 2018 and 2020 champion Naomi Osaka advanced to the quarters by beating 2023 champion Coco Gauff in a rematch of their first meeting at the U.S. Open in 2019. And although Venus Williams suffered a 3-set first-round loss in solo play, the oldest singles player at Flushing Meadows since 1981 will be back on the court in the women's doubles quarterfinals around the time this podcast comes out. But much of the drama has come from on- and off-court controversies pertaining to unwritten rules. As far as I can tell, baseball is the only sport whose unwritten rules have their own Wikipedia page, unless you count the entry for golf etiquette. But at this tournament, tennis is making a bid to be the testiest sport. The biggest dust-up came after Latvian Jelena Ostapenko's second-round loss to American Taylor Townsend. After Townsend won in straight sets, the two met at the net, where, according to Townsend, Ostapenko berated her for having no class and no education, and challenged her to see what happens if they play outside the U.S. Evidently, Ostapenko forgot that the two played at the National Bank Open in Toronto last summer, and Townsend beat her in straight sets that time, too. Ostapenko's comments were widely condemned by other players, including Gauff and Osaka, the latter of whom called what Ostapenko said, quote, one of the worst things you can say to a black tennis player in a majority white sport. Ostapenko doubled down on Instagram at first, where she explained that she had, quote, told my opponent that she was very disrespectful, as she had a net ball in a very deciding moment and didn't say sorry at all. There are some rules in tennis that most of the players follow, and it was the first time that this happened to me on tour. If she plays in her homeland, it doesn't mean that she can behave and do whatever she wants. In addition to the supposed sin of not saying sorry when a net cord went her way, Townsend also earned Ostapenko's ire by beginning their warm-up at the net instead of following the convention of starting at the service line and then moving to the baseline before finishing at the net. Townsend, who said she's always warmed up that way, took the high road in the moment and later said, the thing that I'm the most proud of is that I let my racket talk. She also did a fair amount of actual talking, including a comment about how Ostapenko's tantrum was very hypocritical because she's not known to have sportsmanship, doesn't have the best code of conduct. Ostapenko, who has a history of sore losing, has also run afoul of unwritten rules complaints herself, including a case at Wimbledon in 2021 when Ayla Tomljanovic accused her of faking an abdominal issue in a failed attempt to disrupt Tomljanovic's momentum with a medical timeout. On Saturday, Ostapenko finally apologized for her comments to Townsend, albeit without naming Townsend, when she wrote on Instagram, English is not my native language, so when I said education, I was speaking only about what I believe as tennis etiquette. The Ostapenko-Townsend altercation was one of the few post-match confrontations over perceived breaches in tennis etiquette. On Saturday, Spain's Jaume Munar had his own tense exchange with Belgium's Zizou Bears after Munar's straight sets third-round victory. Bears said Munar had been talking a little bit of trash late in the match, so Bears asked him why. He was apparently not so happy with my grunting during the match, which I didn't know, explained Bears, who told Munar, it's nothing towards you at all. Munar said Bears' grunting bothered him 2 or 3 times and concluded, I think he did some wrong things, but he said it was not on purpose, so it's not much more than that. Earlier, a second-round battle between German Daniel Altmaier and Greek Stefanos Tsitsipas boiled over after Altmaier won in a 5-set upset. In the 4th set, Altmaier surprised the Stefan Fatsis favorite by serving underarm, and later in that set, Tsitsipas retaliated by firing a ball into Altmaier's body when Altmaier was at net. After the match, Mike's caught Tsitsipas saying, next time, don't wonder why I hit you, okay? I'm just saying, if you serve underarm, he repeated, if you serve underarm, before Altmaier walked away. The same day, a first-round women's doubles match culminated in a meeting between Russia's Anna Kalinskaya and American Peyton Stearns, because Kalinskaya didn't see Stearns apologize after hitting several forehands toward her. Kalinskaya was caught on the broadcast saying, I just expected some respect. I didn't see you saying sorry one time. Stearns later tweeted, "She didn't see me apologize when I had hit some forehands at her. Never hit her, but I put my hand up and she wasn't looking. Cleared the air at the end and all is good. Handshake emoji, sealed with a fist bump." At least that particular Peace Summit had a happy ending. Of course, the first flare-up related to unwritten rules at the tournament occurred during the first round when U.S. Open antihero Daniil Medvedev had a meltdown during and after his first-round loss. Medvedev's opponent, Benjamin Bonzi, was up 5-4 at match point in the third set when a photographer, whose credential was later revoked, prematurely walked onto the court after a fault. Chair umpire Greg Allensworth told the photographer to get off the court, then gave Bonzi a second first serve because of the delay. Medvedev complained about the umpire and riled up the crowd, which chanted "second serve." "He wanted to go home, guys. He doesn't like to be here. He gets paid by the match, not by the hour," Medvedev said about Allensworth into the microphones behind the chair. When play resumed after 6 minutes, Medvedev broke Bonzi and won the set in a tiebreak before finally losing in 5 sets and destroying his racket. That one might be a matter of written rules as much as unwritten rules, but Medvedev said he didn't think the photographer-induced delay was long enough to warrant a do-over on Bonzi's first serve. Medvedev was fined $42,500 for unsportsmanlike conduct and racket abuse. "Daniil started it," said Bonzi, who had asked the umpire why Medvedev didn't get a time violation for the extended delay. "He put oil on the fire." So there's a lot of language here that would not be out of place in the mouth of my 3-year-old daughter. A lot of "he started it" and "she didn't say sorry." We haven't even mentioned the CEO of a Polish paving company who was roundly reviled online for snatching a cap from a young boy when a player tried to hand his cap to the kid, or Alcaraz's brother Alvaro, who broke the unwritten rules of barbering by evidently giving Alcaraz such a horrendous haircut that Carlos converted it into a buzz cut. Which
it is so bad, by the way.
Well, Alcaraz's buddy, Francis Tiafoe, said it was definitely terrible. I beg to differ. I think it looks good. I don't know. I mean, maybe no haircut would look that bad on Carlos Alcaraz. It does make him more aerodynamic, as Tiafoe pointed out. So why have tennis tempers been so heated? As Townsend said, it's competition. People get upset when they lose. And maybe it also has to do with the smaller arenas and louder crowds at the U.S. Open. Jessica Pegula, who as we speak is the lone remaining American in the women's singles draw, said New York City tends to bring out just a lot of drama, I guess. As a New Yorker, I can confirm. Pegula continued, "I feel like the crowds, they're pretty crazy. They kind of get everyone riled up." And she added, "Everyone is tense. It's the last slam of the season, your last chance to go deep at a slam for a while. I think people maybe just get stressed out, and you're out there competing and fighting and trying to win. I think it just gets emotional. Adrenaline starts flowing. People get into it." However, Coco Gauff countered that this behavior is always happening, and we're only noticing now because the U.S. Open spotlight is so bright. For players, she said, this is just another week on tour, and these things happen more frequently than maybe the ones who just tune into the Grand Slams think. In a 2018 article for ESPN, my former co-author and podcast partner Sam Miller argued that there's a method to the madness of baseball's unwritten rules, and that most of them are intended to discourage tactics that provide opponents with a competitive advantage. So you don't want them to swing 3-0 when you're throwing a meatball because they might hit a home run, so you try to intimidate them into not doing that. Ironically, this policing of standards, which is ostensibly designed to promote decorum, ends up spoiling it instead. And extra ironically, tennis's tradition of the post-match handshake, which is supposed to improve sportsmanship, often has the opposite effect. Altmaier said he's not a fan of discussions at the net because in the heat of the moment, you can say stuff which you wouldn't normally say and you regret afterward. You can see why tennis players would whine about distracting grunts, atypical warm-up practices, unreturnable body shots, or unexpected underarm serves if they think those things break their concentration or make them more likely to lose. But being upset about balls that tip over the net seems silly, even by unwritten rules standards. Net cords don't happen on purpose. There's really no need to apologize, and even baseball players aren't expected to say sorry because of a ball that takes a bad bounce or a home run that scrapes off the top of the wall. So, what do you two think? Does baseball still reign supreme as the most oversensitive, unwritten rulesiest sport, or is tennis coming for its crown?
Baseball wins every time. No contest. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah. You do make a compelling case, Ben, but while baseball may have lost its role as the national pastime, I'm not sure it can ever lose its role as the national unwritten rules standard bearer.
Yeah, it's true. It's fair. Baseball has gotten more liberal about this stuff with the let the kids play and less backlash to bat flips and such, but there is a lot of ingrained resistance, and it'll take some time to overcome that reputation.
That's all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show that is in the podcast feeds right now for our treasured Slate Plus members. It's a preview of the NFL season, hang up and listen style. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking try free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis, and for Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thanks for listening.